When I say this is your fault, I'm not agreeing with it, but I'm calling it out because that's what the message is being pushed right now. Not straight up, not clear words, but it is there. A violent act happens and it's called terrorism. And most immediately, the focus shifts not onto the attacker, not onto the ideology, not onto the intelligence failures or policing. It shifts onto the firearms. And then, more specifically, the people who already hold licenses and already follow the law. Now, before we go any further, quick thing, if you want to support my channel, my link tree is in the description below. I've got all my links to the ways that you can support this channel. Now, let me be very clear. What happened was horrific. People were killed, families are grieving, and nothing in this video downplays that. But grief does not replace logic, and terrorism should never be used as an excuse to shut down scrutiny. The federal government has announced a national gun buyback. It's expected to cost around about $1 billion, shared between the Commonwealth and the states. Alongside that, we're hearing about further restrictions on firearm categories, limits on how many firearms a person can own, and tighter rules on who can actually hold a license. This is being framed as urgent, as unavoidable, and if you question it, well, you're told this isn't the time. That phrase really does matter. Here is the key issue. The government is not saying licensed shooters committed a terrorist act. What they're doing is more indirect. A terrorist act occurred. Terrorism represents extreme risk. Firearms exist in the community, therefore firearms must be further restricted. That's the logic. And well, the problem isn't emotion. The problem is, well, what is missing? There's a simple question that has never been answered to my knowledge as of today's date. What has exactly failed in the licensed firearm systems? Where did licensing fail? Where did background checks fail? And where did storage laws fail? And where did compliance break down? These questions haven't been addressed. Instead, terrorism itself is treated as enough justification. Once that word is used, well, the details, they stop mattering. And quietly, the burden shifts. Instead of the government proving how licensed firearms contributed to the risk, licensed shooters are now expected to justify why they still exist. That flips the logic on its head. So why licensed shooters? Not because evidence points there, but because they are known. They're registered, regulated, and very easy to act on. They're only the group that the government has already full leverage over. And that doesn't make them responsible. It makes them convenient. Real counter-terrorism focuses on ideology, radicalisation, intelligence failures, surveillance gaps, known persons of concern, and enforcement breakdowns. But what we're seeing here is fear being redirected away from where the problem actually sits and towards where the action is the easiest. It looks like action, but it avoids the hard work. Gun buybacks sound serious, they sound decisive, and they make the general population feel safer. But they rely on one big assumption: compliance. Buybacks only work when people who already follow the law because they're willing to hand in firearms for compensation, not the actual people the terrorism policy is meant to stop. That's not an option. That is how compliance actually works. Just have a look at the joke of the machete bins down in Victoria. Buybacks remove firearms for the most regulated group in the country. They don't target the ideology, they don't disrupt the networks, and they don't fix intelligence failures. They're symbolic, and symbolism, well, it's not security. Quick pause here. If you're finding this information useful and you're enjoying this video, make sure you support my channel. My link tree is in below, which will take you to all the links of how you can support this channel. So let's keep going. So this actually won't fall on criminals first. It will fall on ordinary people. Farmers using tools for pest control, sports shooters competing under strict rules, and collectors who legally preserve historical items, and rural Australians already dealing with tighter limits. Many of these people have already complied with every single change for decades, and each time they were told that would be enough. And each time, well, the goalposts keep moving again. That erodes trust, and not just in firearms policy. This isn't a united position. Some people within the government have raised their concerns as well, not because they're opposed to safety, but because they understand firearm policy beyond the headlines. And when voices inside the system says this has gone too far, that should actually show you that things need to slow down. Instead, those voices are being sidelined in the name of urgency. Urgency is not evidence. So you'll hear this a lot. Now isn't the time to disagree. That phrase isn't about respect. It's about stopping questions. Democracy doesn't pause because emotions are high. In fact, scrutiny matters more than ever. Laws rushed through during shock have a habit of becoming permanent, and once restrictions are in place, they are very, very rarely go backwards. Notice what's not being discussed. Serious talk about intelligence, coordination, serious talks about monitoring known risks, serious talks about enforcement failures and how existing powers were used. These conversations are very hard, and blaming licensed shooters is extremely easy. You can grieve victims and still demand rational policy. You can support safety without accepting collective punishment. You can reject violence without giving into fear-based lawmaking. These positions aren't opposites. They're basic standards for responsible government. And if this passes, which they've made some massive changes in the last few days, each restriction becomes a baseline for the next. Categories shrink, limits tighten, costs rise, and participation, well, it fades. Not because people were dangerous, but because compliance was never ever enough. So when you hear this message, this is your fault. Understand what is really happening. Terrorism is being used to justify policies that target people who already had nothing to do with this. Licensed shooters aren't being blamed openly. They're being blamed scrutinally, and that's far more dangerous. And if the government wants to address terrorism, it needs to do it honestly by targeting the causes, by fixing the failures, and by strengthening enforcement where it actually really matters, not by shifting fear onto the most regulated civilians in this country. And don't forget, if you'd like to support this channel, you can check my link tree up below, and don't forget to subscribe as well. I just want to say thank you so much for everybody who has subscribed to this journey so far, and I look forward to 2026. But if you want to see another one of my videos, make sure you click this video on the screen right now.